This weekend, Eric and I watched the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the movie about Mr. Rogers, starring Tom Hanks that came out last year. If you haven't seen it, oh man, it's really a great movie, and it's a really nice movie to watch in this kind of hard, uncertain season. I encourage you to watch it. The movie is really less about Mr. Rogers than it is about a journalist whose life is changed when he interviews Mr. Rogers. At one point, Mr. Rogers tells the journalist that we must remember what it was like to be a child. He even asks the journalist about his favorite childhood companion. Not his human best friend, but the doll or stuffed animal or blanket that gave him remember what it was like to be comfort and joy as a child. He even asks the journalist about his. I saw Shannon on Facebook this week. You had a post about Ingwa Peters' childhood companion that has gone missing and had to be replaced. Fred Rogers was a Presbyterian minister, so I suspect that he was already thinking about Matthew 18 when he talked to that journalist, to adults in general, about remembering what it's like to be a child. I'm sure he remembered how Jesus told the disciples that if any of them wanted to be great in the kingdom of heaven, they had to become like a little child. In fact, Jesus said that unless we become like little children, we can't enter the kingdom of heaven at all. It's with the words of Jesus and Reverend Fred Rogers in mind that I share with you a few precious memories from my own childhood. A good chunk of this sermon is taken from a sermon that I first preached at an Easter Vesper service in South Carolina. And I actually shared it with you on, I think, my first Easter at Eliot. So if you were here 4 years ago and you heard it then, you'll hear some of it again. Maybe you remember, maybe not. But it remains one of the sermons that is closest to my heart. Perhaps because it's deeply personal, and perhaps, I hope, because it offers some deep truth. I've updated it a bit for our present circumstances. When I was a little girl, my best friend Abby and I were queens of our vast universe. There were days before Tiger King when I was a saber-toothed tiger and I lived in a cage that looked a lot like her nightstand. Abby was my keeper. Other days, we lived together in a mysterious secret garden underneath her back porch, where we survived on provisions of milk and honey that came out of the hanging flower baskets. Some weeks we would put on our scientist hats and sneak down to the pond behind Abby's house. We'd fill little jars with mud and water. We made amazing discoveries. In our backyard swimming pool, Abby and I were alternately mermaids or Olympic synchronized swimmers. When we could not be together, we would talk for hours on the telephone. If Abby were eating a cupcake, she would send me a bite through the phone, and I could actually taste the chocolate. This was not pretend. It was not make-believe. It was real. We believed. I feel a little bit nostalgic now when I remember those early years of my friendship with Abby. I don't know when I stopped believing in the secret garden. I don't know when I stopped tasting the chocolate in the cupcake crumbs that Abby ground into the handset of her telephone receiver. Sorry, Miss Barron. I don't remember ever being told to stop playing pretend. My parents, who are here, hi Mom, Dad, they always encouraged our wild imaginations. But I do know that at some point, maybe not all at once, maybe gradually, but at some point, I started to believe my eyes more than my imagination. With each year bringing a little more experience and education, some of the magic of childhood disappeared. Once children reach a certain age, they learn to grow up and to see with the eyes of their mind. It's not just teachers and parents who tell us this, of course. The world assails us with all kinds of attacks that convince us to believe what we see. Through the eye of science, we know and understand our world better. I believe in science, by the way. Trying to balance budgets, we learn that money does not grow on trees. Experience has taught us that the sting of death is real and that cancer and depression really do hurt. There's no cure for old age. Marriage is sometimes hard. People are sometimes mean. We call all of these life lessons part of growing up. Seems like a euphemism, doesn't it? I worry that a pandemic like this might cause our children to grow up too fast. Or perhaps the long days at home away from classrooms might open up new opportunities for childhood. I'm not sure. In today's Easter story, we meet two of Jesus' friends who are very much grown up. It's been 3 days since Jesus died and was buried, and these disciples are sad as they walk from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They had learned to believe their eyes, to stop pretending that Jesus is the king they were hoping for. After all, he's dead, even if his body is missing. The future that they envisioned is as lost as my secret garden under Abby's porch. It can only be remembered, but not reclaimed. But then a stranger comes along and joins these disciples on their walk. The stranger doesn't even know what has happened. The whole thing must have been just their imagination. But we had hoped, they say. But we had hoped. Oh, how foolish you are, the stranger replies. Yes, so foolish. We should have known better. We just pretend it was just our imagination. So foolish. This threesome, they travel the road together until dusk. I imagine that they are talking smartly about Moses and the prophets. They're telling stories, recounting their hopes, trying to figure out what to do next. And as evening falls and they reach Emmaus, the three men stop for dinner and a good night's rest. In sort of an odd turn of events, the stranger is the first to pick up the bread from the table. He blesses it and breaks it and shares it with everyone. The disciples must have blinked their eyes and furrowed their brows and even shook their heads to make sure they were seeing clearly. Just a moment ago, this was a stranger, someone they'd never met before. Are they imagining things? Is the light playing tricks on their eyes? Or is this really Jesus, the crucified one, sitting at the table with him? It is him. They're sure of it. And just like that, just as soon as they recognize him, he's gone. The Jesus stranger is gone. But this was not pretend. It was not make-believe. It was real. This time they believed. Wonder, mystery, and faith are restored. How foolish we were! Were not our hearts burning within us? Perhaps we can't unlearn everything that our parents and teachers and life have taught us. But the Easter faith is at its core a childlike faith. It's a faith that knows that what we see with our eyes is not always the most real thing or the only thing. What we see with our eyes is an illness that is wreaking havoc on our world and claiming the lives of too many people. What we see with our eyes is a scarcity of PPE, of toilet paper and yeast, of dollars and cents. What we see with our eyes is separation, isolation, distance, loneliness. But Easter tells us that something else is true too. If we will look with our childlike eyes, the eyes of our hearts and our imaginations, we will also see a God who is triumphant over death and a healer of body and soul. We will see a God whose abundance overflows in the rain that waters the earth in the spring, whose abundance overflows in the bread that is broken around our family tables, whose abundance overflows in the generous souls who sew masks, deliver meals, and donate their stimulus checks. We will see a spirit that connects us across isolation, loneliness, and fear. This is not make-believe or pretend. For Abby and I, that space under the porch was every bit a secret garden. In the Emmaus story, that stranger on the road was really Jesus. The kingdom of earth is every bit the kingdom of heaven. Whether or not we will recognize the stranger or enter the kingdom, it depends, first of all, whether we insist on only seeing with our grown-up eyes, or if we will practice seeing with our childlike hearts. This is not make-believe. It's how we make belief. And the more grown-up we are, the more practice it will take. Another memory that I have of Abby is her collection of I Spy books. I asked Eric to I have a picture from one of those books, and Eric's gonna put it up on your screen for you. I hear him rolling around on the chair upstairs. These books have marvelous photographs with all sorts of objects mixed together. And the rhymes on the bottom invite you on a treasure hunt. What's this one say? I spy a thimble, 4 birds of red, 2 fuzzy chickens and a gold-trimmed sled, 3 paper clips, an ornament house, a bottle of glue, and a nutty brown mouse. Abby and I would spend hours poring over these books, searching for the hidden figures and for whatever else caught our interest and imagination. We could always find what we were searching for if we looked just right, if we looked long enough. This is the Easter faith, friends, to look at the world that is given to us and to discover the kingdom of heaven hidden within it. You can take the picture down, Eric. This is the Easter faith, to look at the strangers who walk the road with us and to see the risen Jesus among them. We must be determined as a child searching the pages of an I Spy book. For many people will try to tell us that Jesus is not really here or he cannot be found. There are plenty of people who would like to convince you that your efforts are futile or that they're simply child's play. Maybe they're right. Maybe it is child's play. Truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. He is walking the road with us, dwelling in our homes, breaking the bread that we share. Friends, may we look with the eyes of our hearts and find that God's kingdom is around us, that Christ is among us. And may we believe with faith like little children that it is the real thing. May it be so. Amen.